Welcome back, America, to Sound Retirement Radio, where we bring you concepts, ideas, and strategies designed to help you achieve clarity, confidence, and freedom as you prepare for and transition through retirement. And now, here is your host, Jason Parker.
America, welcome back to another round of Sound Retirement Radio. I'm so glad to have you tuning into this episode. The title of the show is number 386, Stretch Your Dollars by Retiring Abroad. But before we get into this episode, I always like to start the day right by renewing our mind. And this verse I have for us comes to us from Isaiah 61:1. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners. How do you fix a broken tomato? Tomato paste. I have a special guest for today's episode. His name is Phil. He and his wife Audrey moved to Mexico about 12 years ago when they retired. He and I did an interview probably 10 years ago, and so I'll be sure to include a link to that old episode in the show notes. Phil is also in the RBC Nerds community portal. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the Retirement Budget Calculator has a private community portal where like-minded money nerds can share their best tips and tricks for living an amazing life in retirement. And just remember, we've got articles, links, and resources available at soundretirementplanning.com. Just click on episode number 386. I have this new quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, actually two of them that I've really been thinking about. I like these. She says, "When you cease to make a contribution, you begin to die." And then she says, "Life must be lived and curiosity kept alive. One must never, for whatever reason, turn his back on life." And then I thought I'd just share with you, now that summer is here in the great Pacific Northwest, two of my favorite things right now are pickleball and riding my electric bike. I told my wife that if I get hit by a car and die while riding my electric bike to a pickleball game, that's a good day. If any of you are pickleball players, I've only played maybe 7 times, but man, I'm going to have to start a new podcast called How Pickleball Ruined My Life. It's really a lot of fun. I've got my first pickleball injury, and I'm just really, really enjoying that game. Without any further ado, let's get into my interview with Phil so that he can tell you all about how you can stretch your dollars by retiring abroad. So it's my good fortune to have Phil Newbold with me to talk about living abroad, living as an expat when you decide to retire. Phil, welcome to Sound Retirement Radio.
Thank you.
Boy, I can't believe how much time has gone by. And you and I were talking just a little bit before this interview. Did you say it's been 12 years now since you've been living abroad?
12 years.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people, there's always been an interest in this, but I think more so than ever, people are really interested in what might it look like and would their dollars stretch further if they lived somewhere outside of the United States. I mean, we're seeing it inside the United States, Phil, where people are moving from Washington to Tennessee and just looking for lower cost of living around the country. But we know some people are saying, well, I wonder what it would look like if I moved out of the country. And that's a big motivator for some people. I don't know. I know that weather and there were other considerations for you, but maybe because people didn't hear our first interview from years and years and years ago, maybe we could go back in time and just give us kind of let us know what this journey has looked like.
Yeah. In my case, maybe it's a little wacky, but about the last 2 years of my life, in terms of working years, I was really studying and analyzing like crazy. I've always had this quirky wanting to research things and look them up and do things. And I really started looking hard. And I started out with a fairly big arena of places I'd like to move to. And in my working days, I did a fair amount of work internationally. So that was kind of an opiate for me. I mean, I love to be elsewhere. I love the adventure of it. I love the different customs, different people. So I knew I wanted to retire as an expat somewhere as best I could. So that's how it started.
Now was it, when you say, just let me ask you a little bit clarification there. Was
Sure.
it more about adventure for you and the people and the experience, or was it also a financial consideration? Were you thinking, I wonder what it would look like if we were to live somewhere else financially?
Now, if you had my wife Audrey on, she'd tell you it was about adventure and experience and that. But for me, cost of living was probably the main driver, because the decision I framed was, okay, I can stay in the United States and live okay, or I can go somewhere else and live very well.
Cool.
So that's kind of how I framed it. And, one of your listeners posed the question, well, what's the cost of living like where you are? Which last time I was a little cagey about it, but I live in a place called Ajijic, Mexico, which is a real nice retirement target for a lot of Americans, Canadians, Germans, English, Dutch, Swiss. Anyway, we got a lot of folks there. This is kind of like the United Nations here. But, the person asked, well, what's the cost of living like where you are versus New Orleans? Well, when I was in the Army, I knew a lot of guys from Tickfaw, Louisiana. And Tickfaw was the place on the bayous. And based on the experience level and sophistication of these guys, I'm going to guess the cost of living was relatively low. Now, on the other hand, if you're in downtown or central New Orleans, depending on where you are, it might be a little different. So it's really complicated. And as I tell people, they say, well, how's the cost of living different in where you are than, if you relate to the U.S.? And I said, well, where I am, I can tell you that any day in great detail. But if you're asking me about Zurich, Lucerne, Moscow, and friends ask these, but what do you think it'd be like to, live in Lucerne? I think it'd be real expensive. I can tell you that. But so what I'm going to do when these things go up, I will give you a contrast between a very nice part of Mexico versus the United States. Now, if you want to live so cheap you can't imagine it, there's little pueblitos all over Mexico. You might disappear in a couple months, but they're extraordinarily inexpensive.
No, but let's back up there, because there is this perception that safety is a concern if you're going to live outside of the United States, especially in Mexico. Has your experience been one where you're waking up afraid for your life on a daily basis? I mean, what's it like?
I have never felt safer.
Okay, so going back, you guys, 2 years leading up to retirement, your wife was up for adventure. You're looking for a better cost of living. You guys love to travel, so you want to be able to have kind of a jumping off place, the place that you can go travel the world but have a home base outside of the United States. So what were some of the other places you looked at as you were considering?
Well, we considered Italy.
Oh, okay.
But Italy, it's part of the EU, and you got the euro, and it can get tricky. Now, one piece that a lot of people don't think of, step one, is currency differentiation. I think if you're going to make a jump to an expat country, you got to say, what do I think is the long-term relationship between the dollar and whatever currency? For example, when we moved to Mexico, there was between 10 and 12 pesos to the dollar. Right now, as of today, there's 20 and a half pesos to the dollar. Okay, so in effect, my position, our property taxes, example, haven't gone up in 12 years. Really? That's odd. No, property taxes have gone up in Mexico, but they haven't gone up for me paying in US dollars. We hope that continues. Things are a little different now, but so you've got that wild card in there. For example, there was a time when the euro was up to 130 it was a 130 euro to $1. Am I saying that right? No, just the opposite. $1.30 to €1. That's about 110. So, you have this dynamic in the background. So we opted, my wife and I, although she was on the train, but not up with the locomotive. And, that was a big, big factor in terms of cost of living. And for example, little things you wouldn't think of when we go up north and we're with her family. Audrey's son tells me he pays $24 for a haircut. I offered to cut his hair, but that wasn't something he was interested in. For us, with tip and everything, it's about $7.
So Panama is a place I hear a lot about.
Panama was considered Ecuador, which is really Costa Rica. Costa Rica, for a while, I think, got overpriced. And now it's, I think, back in the strike zone. That's, that's pumas and iguanas and beautiful forest and shoreline. So that was a little wilder for me. So if I want to go to something that I would say is sort of Seattle-ish, because I know a lot of your listeners are going to be there, Guadalajara is kind of the best and worst of everything. There's areas of Guadalajara you probably wouldn't go into in a tank. And yet there's other areas you'd want to be in your Bentley or something going in there. So, there's usually places close around. And I wanted to live within an hour to an hour and a half of a nice metropolitan area. I wanted to live within an hour of an airport, et cetera. So, again, there's just so many things to consider. But I have to tell you a quick one on this to give you some cost of living. When we were in Washington 12 years ago, our property taxes were a little over $6,000. Our property taxes have been for the last 12 years less than $300. So you say, well, that's kind of nice. Our electricity runs us about $30 a month. Water is about $300 a year. Our telephone, internet, all of that stuff is about $75 a month. And also, I would say that our TV is $75 a month, but we've got about every channel you can get on the planet. The cost advantage of a lot of these things is pretty incredible.
That is incredible. What about food and dining out? What does that look like to go have a nice dinner?
When we first moved here, dining out was $20. And I'll define that as a nice steak, glass of wine, baked potato, onion rings, salad, dessert. Now it's gone up to, it depends on how fancy you go, up to maybe $40 or $50. $50 if you go to the nicest place in town. In Guadalajara, that is. Things are a lot less
$40 to $50 per person.
No, that's total.
Total,
yeah. Now, you may say, no, how does Audrey respond to that, who is a wonderful cook? Well, she hasn't cooked in years. We eat 2 meals a day. We eat them out. Breakfast, full breakfast for us costs about $15 at the most. And that's your eggs, your bacon, your toast, your this, your that, including your beverages, whatever you have. And lunch, if we have it here in town, is going to be about $35. $35.
I would think that because you guys, the place that you selected to live is somewhat of an expat community, like you were saying. I mean, you got people from all over the world. So I would think that prices would go up as a result of attracting, expats.
They have.
Yeah.
The prices I'm giving you are kind of the escalated prices.
These are the elevated prices. Okay.
Yeah. And when we first moved here, I mean, you could live easily on about $25 to $30 a day, food. Now it's a little more expensive, but compared to, we go up to the U.S. at least twice a year. I go there and I hold my heart when I go to even a basic restaurant, like a cheesecake factory or something like that. It's kind of like, oh my God, what? What do you mean $12 for a glass of wine? Here it's about $3. And it's good wine. It comes from Chile because we have a zero duty deal with Chile. So these are all little things you can research. And I'm just giving you the Mexico story. I'm not selling Mexico because no place you relocate to is perfect for everyone. And this kind of thing is not for everyone. I would never tell everybody in the universe that I don't want everybody going over the Bay Bridge and going to other places, going south. We get enough people coming into Mexico right now. We got a lot of folks coming here, especially from the U.S.
What are some of as you talk about some of the disadvantages, you've been there now for 12 years, is that right?
12 years.
12 years. So as you think about some of the things that maybe just irritate you, what are some of those nuances or some of the things that people don't think about that you think about after the fact? And you're like, oh, that's a little bit frustrating.
I don't think it's so much financial things, as it is, how do you do it? How do I pay my property taxes? How do I get my car vehicle license? Now, if anyone's listening from California, take a deep breath. Our vehicle license fee is about $30 a year.
Wow.
So I know in California it's a skosh more. Let's see, what are the things that, I think the things are, there's a different sense of urgency here. So let's say if your landline goes out, we are the old timers that still have a landline, by the way. And you call the phone company and they'll say, yeah, okay, we'll get to it. That's about a week. However, I have my own phone company guy now, my guy Marco. I pay him 50 pesos. And I mean, I think he drops what he's doing, even if he's having dinner, to check it out. 50 pesos is $2, about $2.40.
Wow. So
I'd say infrastructure is not quite as reliable as in the States, but it's not a big deal.
Well, it's something you have to get used to, or it's something that you get accustomed to this new pace of life?
It's kind of seasonal. For example, this is right now the rainy season, which is a lot of electricity. So since we get our TV from satellite, we get some things where people start falling apart and their lines are, kind of doing, it's kind of like a Star Trek thing in a way. What do you do when that's going on? You just say, whatever. And you wait for it to come out, or you just don't watch it. Electricity is not quite as good as in the U.S. Although when I lived in the Washington area, every time we had a bad storm, we were out for a week. We lived in the end of a road, an unincorporated Port Orchard that maybe utility guys couldn't find. I don't know. But anyway, that took a while. So I don't find anything that bothersome on that change. What I do find bothersome is some of the administration takes a while to figure out how does that work. Now, here's what you do on all of this. There's a way around everything, especially in Mexico. So we have this lady we work with, a wonderful, 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 wonderful lady who was educated in where was it? She was educated in Italy in some wonderful place, has her advanced degrees. She has a psychology practice, and she also helps people with stuff. And so I say, gee, they passed a new thing on a new tax registration number. How do I do that? I do that by calling her. She comes to the house. We do some things on the computer. She takes care of it. So you need a navigator. I think whether you're retiring in Vietnam, whether you're retiring in London, whether you're retiring in London, you got to be kidding. But anyway, people do that. They usually have thick wallets. And, a guide is very helpful. And it's really easy to find people like that because in this community, things are word of mouth. So who's a real good, like an investments kind of guy, they would refer me to, ready for this, Parker Financial. Really? Except they do mainly insurance and things like that. But so having a navigator to see what else
there's a Parker Financial down there. And
there's a Parker Financial.
That's
funny. What? Next time I'm walking by it, I'll take a picture and send it to you.
Send it to me. So tell me about. I've got so many questions here for you. The first one is travel as a jumping off place, because you guys love to travel the world.
Absolutely.
Is it more expensive? Is it less expensive when you're booking travel from Mexico to these different destinations? It's far less.
Far less if you're going south. If you're going to London or any place else, it's pretty comparable.
Okay.
We have an international airport here. You can get to anywhere in the world from here, except you got to make a stop in Mexico City.
And because you do travel so much, what has been your favorite destination of all the places you and Audrey have been? What's your favorite?
I'll give you my favorite one in the hemisphere, which, because I could talk all day about the foreign ones. But here's a trivia question for you. What's the largest canyon in the world?
Well, I know this is like a trick question. You want me to say Grand Canyon is what I'm assuming you think I'm going to say. But what is the largest canyon in the world?
Copper Canyon is 3 times as big as the Grand Canyon.
Copper Canyon.
Yeah, Copper Canyon is about 700 miles away. But the interesting thing about this is where, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Tarahumara Indians. They can run all day and all night. That's their turf. That's where they are. And if you ever want to go to a sacred place where you just feel something there, that place is just incredible.
Interesting.
So that's a favorite place there that nobody up north thinks about, and they assume, as I did, by the way, the Grand Canyon it's grand, so it's the biggest thing in the world. So I like that.
Interesting.
There's a lot in the hemisphere. In fact, we're going to be going in March of next year for 32 days, starting in Buenos Aires and going around the southern tip and Antarctica and all of that. So we'll check that out. Internationally, there's a zillion different places that are great.
I should tell people too, Phil, that you have joined the Retirement Budget Calculator. You're one of the RBC nerds in there. So anybody that wants to continue a discussion or have a conversation, that's the purpose of the community portal within the calculator, so that people can connect and we can all live our best life by interacting with one another. So I just remind our listeners that if anybody wants to continue the conversation, they can connect with you from within the RBC Nerds community.
And I'd love to do it. I have time.
Yeah, that's cool.
Certainly more time than when I was up at 5 a.m. to catch a ferry to go into Seattle, and then getting home about 8 o'clock. So this is a good deal.
Now, weather. You were living in Washington State. We're not this time of year right now. Weather's this is paradise. Nobody wants to leave Washington State right now. But how important was weather when determining where you guys wanted to live? And what would you say about the climate where you guys are now?
Well, on a 1 to 10, we're a 9 something.
Wow.
Let's see.
What's an important consideration?
National Geographic rated the weather here second best in the world.
Wow.
Now, what does that mean? That means we have 2 hot months where it'll get up to 90. Most of the time here is going to be in the 70s. We get 250 days of sun a year. And in the winter, now brace yourself for this, it gets down to 60.
Oh.
And it's cute to see the people in town will be wearing the fur boots, the parkas with the hood up.
Oh, yeah.
And so then, the first year I was here, I walked around in shirt sleeves and people thought I was an extraterrestrial. But the weather here is very nice. And I think it's someplace in Nairobi is number 1. But we preferred this.
One of the things that you and I have talked about over the years is you have shared with me how, especially when you first moved to Mexico, that there was a real sense of community. It was people from all over the world. They were all transplants. Everybody was looking to make friends. And so that social element was something you really enjoyed. Do you find 12 years later that that's still the case?
I do, but the friends have changed. Some people have passed. Some people have gone back, and usually they go back for healthcare reasons, not for them, but for family members.
Oh,
you see that a lot, Well, grandma's 94 now and she just doesn't get around. And, people do a lot of that. Some people, they came here and this just wasn't right for them.
Mm.
And the common denominator for me of people who say this isn't right, they come here and they want this to be the United States or Canada.
Mm.
And it's not. It's Mexico. And it has a lot of positive things. I mean, the family culture here is phenomenal. The people are so friendly and giving. It's amazing. But it's not America. And I know what bugs Audrey, my wife, is she can't find things in the store. So she used that as the reason she stopped cooking.
Oh, okay.
It's convenient. Now, I'm sure the Mexicans that go up to the United States, and I know they have Mexican stores and things, and especially in California, they're probably as frustrated as heck because they can't find what they want to find.
Yeah.
A certain pepper sauce or something. Where is that stuff? Yeah, the culture is now, ironically for us, the culture of the area we live in, I think there's 50 homes in our little gated community here. And I just like the gating. You can think it's for security to keep the cartel. Keep in mind the cartel have armored personnel carriers and tanks and things where they're off finding their thing. We don't mix that much with the people. We know the neighbors on our street. They're nice people. We deal a lot with, expats that are scattered all over the community. A number of our friends are Mexicans and they're wonderful friends. Oh my God. They'll drop everything they're doing to help you in a heartbeat. So we've kind of, as time has passed, we've become a little bit more universal in our outlook of living here.
Another question that comes up frequently is healthcare. And I know that you've spoken real highly of the experience you've had, but maybe you could talk about what it's like. Like if you need healthcare, do you go back to the United States for that, or do you choose to receive healthcare in Mexico?
Well, it depends. There's 2 aspects of that. The quality of the healthcare in the big cities is outstanding. So if you have something that you really need state-of-the-art tech, blah, 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 Guadalajara, an hour and 15 minutes away. So that's where you go there. The doc on the box kind of things, where you have a doctor or 2 in an office that gives, general practitioner care. The culture of caring is off the scale. It's that nice. Now, I think they're great at that. If you've got something really complicated, it's going to require some real diagnosis, state-of-the-art tests. You can start in Guadalajara, but you may want to come back to the U.S. But I'm not an expert on this. I think you probably have speakers on it. There's a tricky loophole when you go away and stop your Medicare for a while, and then you have to can pay penalties and things like that. I would go back if I had something terrible like a cancer or something. that needed a prolonged treatment path. It depends. Last time we did one, and I'll tell a quick story. A friend of mine, Don, here in town, is a realtor, needed a triple bypass, and he was working with a pretty well-known, heart specialist here, and it was going to cost $21,000. And he said, that just sounds, I'm not so comfortable. So he decided, and the guy says, I really, really encourage him. He says, I'm going to go back to my alma mater. The guy says, I really, really encourage you not to do that. And who is the surgeon? Same guy.
No.
A lot of these guys are board certified on both sides of the border. Because medical tourism here is a big, 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 big deal. So for maybe $1,000, you can get your whole mouth redone in dentistry and, things like that. So anyway, the guy got to pay $210,000, which was, a little different. But I think it depends. I think at the end of the day, you got to feel if you have a choice, you have to feel comfortable. Let's talk about, what do we do? Yeah, that's fine.
Medicare doesn't cover you down there. So do you have any type of insurance?
We do not. But here's the but. The deal is a few hospitals have set up relationships with your caregiver in the United States. So for us, for certain things like stroke and heart attack, let's say, the biggies, it's handled through, in other words, they'll file on a claims basis. They'll do that. So our real concern was only for catastrophic care. If I can, and I know there's medical evacuation services here that'll fly out and so on, but the trick on those and why I didn't do it is because you got to be stable, and that's fine if you're stable. But if I'm truly stable, I can get on the American Airlines flight or Volaris or somebody, and in 3 hours I can be in San Francisco or Oakland for healthcare. So healthcare is complicated. Now I have a friend who pays $800 a month, and she has a $10,000 deductible. However, she's 74. She has everything wrong with her that a person can have. I mean, they should ship her off to a medical school and let them work away at her. But insurance is expensive. Now, locally, you're not denied. If you walk into a hospital or you walk into Cruz Roja, which means Red Cross, they'll take care of you. So I look at it.
That's local. That's how much she's paying there in Mexico for insurance. $800 a month for a $10,000 deductible.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And once she hits her $10,000, though, is it pretty comprehensive at that point, or?
Yeah. She had her knee done recently. This is the third time, and you may think mathematically, aren't there only two knees? Well, she's had it done 3 times. So she's a little ahead of the curve.
Is she getting taller or shorter with each knee?
She's getting shorter and wider. So, but anyway, no, healthcare is okay. And I would tell you that when you read these things in international living and all these things, caveat emptor on some of that stuff. You can do it. They'll take care of you for $300 a month or this and that. Look into that carefully because there's a lot of exclusions out there. And, Audrey and I spent some time in Hanoi not long ago. Yeah, the healthcare is almost free there, but, I don't know. Maybe it's real good. Maybe it's not. I mean, some of that is perception. If you walk into a nice medical center here in Guadalajara, it's not going to feel much different than a nice medical center in Seattle. Inflation
is a big deal right here in the United States these days. How is it inflation? How are you experiencing inflation down there in Mexico?
It's a factor, and it translates through foods, but imported foods a lot. You want Del Monte peaches, you're going to, whoa, what happened to the price there? You want the local brand of peaches, they taste the same, but peanut butter is an example. The cost of Skippy is twice the cost of the local peanut butter here, Aladdin or whatever it is. And I can't tell the difference, but it's a factor. I think our health, true inflation is probably about 5.5% to 6%, even though it's listed at 7%. Okay. In the US, we were just there in May, and holy mackerel, I couldn't believe it. Gas prices, which I think the president announced gas is now $4 a gallon. I don't know where he's got his own stash somewhere. I don't know where that is, but I might drive over there. Our gas is $4 a gallon.
Wow.
And you and I talked about it a few days ago. However, the price of gas, and we're a big petroleum exporter, believe it or not, but that cost covers the national healthcare system also. So think of it as you're doing something good for yourself and charity through that. But we're in a cash market. So like my home, most homes here, almost 90% of them, you pay cash when you buy your house. That's an important consideration. Now for the Californians, Washingtonians, Texans, hey, that's a good deal. But I can sell my house now and I'll get about 900,000 out of it. And you come down here, you can't find a $900,000 house. You say, I'll have to put some in my pocket for other things. So that keeps the cost down. For example, we bought our house 12 years ago. I could sell it now for a nice gain, nothing like U.S. gains. I mean, and that, by the way, let me make an aside. It's going to sound like a silly thing, but if you're thinking you're going to move to another country, especially here, and in 10 years, you're going to sell your house and make a lot of money on it, probably not going to work. You'll make money on it, but compared to, let's say, Silicon Valley and
yeah, sure.
Seattle,
Well, we've had some pretty incredible housing prices all throughout the country, especially the last several years. We had a question because I had shared on the RBC Nerds, the Retirement Budget Calculator community. I had shared that we were going to have you on here, and I have a couple of questions from them that I thought I'd throw at you real quick.
Good. I'll try to be more succinct.
One of them is this question is: are you in an expat community, or do you prefer to live in a more local inhabitant area? Some want to live the experience of living abroad. Others want to have more of that expat community. How would you describe where you live?
Both. We are in a gated community, right on the edge of town, and I can walk maybe 900 feet. And now I'm with the folks, and all our interactions: restaurants, pharmacies, movies, theaters, car repair, you name it. It's with the locals. So I can kind of consider us both. And we have some very nice friends here who we go out to dinner with, and they're not expats, they're other folks. So we kind of have a hybrid life in that regard. Do I like living in a gated community? Yes. Why so? Because all of my stuff from Amazon or whatever else comes with the guard. He has it. I drive in, I pick it up. It's there. So we live kind of a hybrid lifestyle. We really do.
Okay. The next one is, what about just financial dealings like banking and those types of issues? Has that been difficult for you to have banking relationships and buying real estate and those types of transactions living in Mexico?
No, real estate transactions are transaction. The closings and so on happen in the United States, believe it or not. So if you're buying a house here for $300,000, it's going to be priced in dollars, and they do that because the peso bounces around a little too much for them. And it'll be settled probably in Louisiana, Texas,
Can you buy a nice house for $300,000?
You can buy a nice house for $300,000. $350,000, you're going to buy a really nice house. And, it kind of goes up from there. And if you lived in parts of Guadalajara where the cartel guys live, they're a little more expensive, but they're palaces.
This next question is, did you really 100% expat, or do you have a U.S. address and you're just out of the country most of the time? And then what about speaking Spanish? Did you learn the language, or what do you do there to navigate language? How much did you move? Like, did you bring everything that you had, or did you just bring the bare essentials, the bare necessities?
Well, all great questions. We live here most of the time in Ajijic. We do have a Texas address. Okay, and so everything goes to Texas and then comes here. I still think of myself as kind of a hybrid. I'm an American, but I'm kind of a Mexican at this point. And to that, I try to immerse myself reasonably, without going nuts about it, in the language, in the skills, and the customs. I know most of the little customs, in terms, you walk in a restaurant and somebody looks up, you say, provecho, which means, go ahead, get back to what you're doing. All these little things. And my Spanish is, I'm going to guess it's about a 6th or 7th grade level, where it's university level in terms of airports, hotels, local businesses around here, et cetera. Where we live, you don't have to be that excellent. And so, you might, like Audrey had the thing, she'll go down the street and she'll see a kid and she'll say, Buenos dias. And I'll say, hi. So, we have a couple of American schools here that teach English because many of the locals, not all, think that English is something that can help them as a skill when they get into the workforce. And it can.
Is there any impact on Social Security?
Nope, not at all. But I do want to get back to you were asking about, I think, banking.
Yeah, banking. Yeah.
And I didn't and I didn't answer that. Banking is fine. We have but it's a multinational Brazilian bank. And what we do, we get paid. See, how do I do this? How do I do this? Oh, I get paid because I banked with them for years and years and actually worked for them for a while. And then I use a product called Zoom. There's a whole lot. It's XOOM. I don't know how you pronounce that, Zoom, but it's Zoom. And what I do is once or twice a month, I'll just wire some money here. And with 2 hours, the money's in my bank. Now, the ATM situation is no different than it is in the United States. Nothing. You can have a checking account, but I've never seen anybody write a check here. You don't do it that way. You just you write a document that's sort of like a check. The bank takes care of it. Or a lot of people, believe it or not, this may be a second world country, but electronic banking and all that is the thing.
How about taxes? Do you pay taxes in Mexico and the United States, or how does that work?
No, you pay taxes. Let's say I was going to go to work for the local drugstore and they pay me a salary. Clearly, I have to pay tax on that. Money not earned in Mexico is not taxable. Similarly, something that's important, that's a differentiator, when you move your stuff, you alluded to stuff.
Yeah.
Most homes here are sold furnished.
Okay.
Almost all of them. So when you go in, you kind of look around and say, I like that, I like that, I like that, I like that, I like that. But then back home, I have one that I'd rather have mine back home than that. We brought probably 50% maybe of our stuff, maybe less, when we relocated here.
Okay.
Because, why? So our house is a combination of nice modern, nice Mexican, God only knows what else, some Asian stuff in here. I don't know how that came to be, but it is. So you want to look at that carefully because remember, movers charge by distance and weight. And on the, like when we moved from Washington, the movers are very familiar with this. So they move you from, let's say Gig Harbor, they'll move you to a place on the border. And it sits in a warehouse for a while. And then the boys will kind of look around and look at your paperwork and say, what do I think? Do we want to look at this, or do we think, is it filled with cocaine, or do we think these are probably old folks that I can trust? And then after that, it gets moved to Ajijic, and then it's kind of in these like containers within the big trucks, and then they move it to the house and bring it in. And it's that was pretty effortless, getting good movers, and that part was easy. I think the hard part is thinking about all this stuff in advance that may concern you, and then learning more about it so it doesn't concern you.
Do you ever see a time where you will move back to the United States? I
think what would happen if I predeceased my wife, she'd be going over the bridge within about 10 minutes on a hypersonic jet that got her there. She would probably go back because of her son or daughter and all that. And Audrey is much less integrated into the community than I am. That's not to say we don't have friends and things, but I'm Felipe. She's not Andrea or something like that. So I'm a lot more comfortable here. And it always depends. You never know 100%. I would see going through the whole thing here. Funeral costs are cheap. I'll ask them to microwave me and put me in the lake or something. Actually, that's not allowed, even though a lot of people do it. That's considered pollution. But no, I can see the time of going back. And I like so many things in life, it depends. Yeah. That's not my plan now, but it depends,
Yeah, but you're enjoying it. You don't feel like you guys made a mistake by moving out of the United States. And for you, proximity to the United States was also important, I believe. Because you have family in California.
Yeah, 3 hours and 5 minutes flight. And that's why we ruled out Italy. That's why we ruled out Panama and why we ruled out Ecuador. I was game for almost any of those, but Audrey felt, well, this is safer and it's a little more like the U.S. And actually, the one really like the U.S. is Panama, but that's hotter than hell there, and I'm not a hotter than hell guy.
So but you traveled. I mean, and this is something you would recommend if somebody's thinking about doing what you guys have done. You wouldn't just pick up and go and watch a couple of videos on YouTube. You would go and visit all of these places, talk to the people, and see what the experience is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other tips for people that are thinking about doing something like this?
Yeah, in a lot of places there will be resources. Maybe there's seminars, whatever. We attended a seminar here. We got to meet a well-known lawyer in the community, some doctors in the community, people that do all the immigration paperwork in the community, et cetera. So you want to have your team, your support team. It's nice if you can meet them in advance. I can't imagine buying something without looking at it. I mean, that just causes my brain to short circuit. But I do have to tell you a good question. We came down here, we met this immigration lady. She says, I can do everything, I do this and that. It was about $600. And I thought, not a chance. I'll just go to the Mexican immigration place in Seattle. So I go in there, and I called them 1,000 times, but I never got it. So I walk in there, and I said, I'd like to get this done. They said, do you have an appointment? I said, no. Well, I couldn't get one. I kept calling on the English line. They said, well, we don't answer the English line. I said, well, okay, now that I'm here. They said, no, you have to have an appointment. Well, now, wait a minute. How do I do it? You call on the Spanish line. So I said, do you answer the Spanish line? She said, not usually. And I thought, oh my God. And it was like about 150 people, babies crying, pet dogs there and all that. So I said, I'm going to go back there and do the $600 thing with my friend Julia Vargas.
What about owning a car and getting around in your community? Do you guys own a vehicle?
Oh, yeah. We own one. Quick story. We moved down in a luxury car. And that thing was like watermelon to flies. You know, the police were always shaking us down. We sold that car, beautiful car. I love that car, but the roads are rough here, and roads are kind of a D here, I would give it, except the highways. Highways are very good. So we bought a little Nissan Note, which is a little hatchback. I don't even know if it has any cylinders in there. It doesn't have a whole lot of power. But now the police don't even look at us. You know, we must be a local guy or something like that. You do that. Now, registration costs, remember, $35.
Oh yeah, $35 to register the vehicle.
$35.
$4 for gasoline.
And we get on the highway about 48 miles to the gallon. So that's pretty good. So it's just about getting around. I mean, we're not impressing anybody with it's a nice 4-door hatchback. It's a nice car. So cars are not, you want to own 2 of them? Sure. You want to go buy 10 of them?
Did you buy that new in Mexico, or did you buy it in the United States and bring it down? No, you bought it in Mexico.
Oh, that's a little complicated. If you're moving to Mexico, I can't speak for every other country in the world, and you want to get it registered, you're going to get it registered north of the border before you get here.
Interesting.
That's a wrinkle worth knowing. And your immigration papers, in days of old, you could just get them done here. Now I believe you have to get them done in the U.S.
Okay.
So you need a little window to plan all this stuff in a little bit of time, and somebody that can guide you through it. And I guarantee you that even north of the border, there's people that can guide you through all of this.
Well, I sure have enjoyed this time, Phil. I know our listeners are going to love. We spoke about this probably 10 years ago when you first made the move. And so I'll include a link in the show notes so that if anybody wants to go back and listen to that original interview, they can. Is there anything else that you think would be really helpful that people need to be thinking about if they're thinking about living as an expat or moving out of the country, moving to Mexico?
Yeah, a couple of things I'd say. Consider your family culture. In other words, is grandma still alive? Is your mom got cancer? And what's the situation there? Because a lot of people don't consider that enough when they move. They just move because they think it's going to be vacation in Puerto Vallarta, but it's not. So know what the family culture is. One of my criteria is I want to be within an hour of an airport and within an hour and a half of a major city. When you're going to do this, really plan carefully, network with people that know it, live it, have gone through it, whether they liked it or didn't like it. That's as valuable input. Be real detailed. Use the resources. International Living is a popular magazine. A lot of people like to look. And don't believe everything they say about real estate, because I don't know how you live in nice places for the money they say. I think they kind of lowball the number a little bit. Kick tires before you buy. And an important thing, adapt to your new place. When you get there, don't go there as an American or a Canadian and say, hell, it's not like back home. I can't get this. I can't do this. I can't do that. And then be flexible. Now, the food is different. It's not your street food in the US or other things. I mean, it's going to be fish and steaks and chicken and good vegetarian. But again, don't come here just as an American or a Canadian. Make up your mind to be flexible and adapt to the culture. You'll enjoy the experience a whole lot more. And except for healthcare, the people that go back usually go back because they decided they didn't like it.
Do people go there just for a couple of months a year? Do you have people that just vacation there where you're at?
And we have a lot of what we call snowbirds here.
Yeah.
The Canadians, I think, would fill the Golden Gate Bridge right behind you there, but they drive, I can't believe this, they drive all the way down from Winnipeg and Toronto and all these places, and they stay 6 months, typically. And that 6 months is usually like November to April or May. Mm-hmm. Then after that, you get the sweatbirds. And the sweatbirds are from the deep south, Texas, New Mexico, and they come down here for 2 to 3 months to kind of cool off. So it's, we got a lot. So if you're thinking you're going to rent something nice the week you come down here and move in immediately, maybe that's not going to work, because rentals, you got to plan that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're having an incredible housing boom here. I mean, it's just hard to keep up with the inflow. And that is a problem. One of the things I forgot, traffic is a factor. You wouldn't think traffic, you think, a donkey cart or something and two guys on horse. We do have guys on horses, by the way, but they're usually on the cell phone. Again, that's the planning thing. Don't come down here cold and expect to get everything set up in 2 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
Plan.
Yeah. Well, for somebody like you, Phil, that loves to plan and likes to think and likes to travel, I mean, it sure seems like it's been a good experience for you. And so it's fun that you're willing to share your experience with our listeners and our community. I appreciate you.
One final thought is, I probably didn't consider Audrey enough in some of the discussion, but she was a good sport. She saddled up and we rode out. But, as much as you can bring whoever your significant other is, your husband, your wife, I wouldn't do it with kids, but we get a lot of people that move down here with kids. Go figure. And a lot of Mexicans.
It's not just retirees, and you've got people of all ages.
Yeah. Mostly older people. A lot of Mexicans have come back because they now think it's a better place to raise their families here than it is up north. That's a new development. That's a very new development.
Interesting.
So, make sure your whole family's on board as best you can. It just makes it easier. I've yacked forever, so hopefully some of this is helpful to your listeners.
Yes, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
I didn't mention afterlife, but if you're gonna die here, by God, you better plan in advance, because that is a legal exercise. We'll save that for some other time.
So the next time we have you on the show, we'll talk about how to die.
10 years. Yeah, 10 years.
All right, Phil, thanks so much for being a guest on Sound Retirement Radio.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Information and opinions expressed here are believed to be accurate and complete, for general information only, and should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or financial advice for any individual, and does not constitute a solicitation for any securities or insurance products. Please consult with your financial professional before taking action on anything discussed in this program. Parker Financial, its representatives, or its affiliates have no liability for investment decisions or other actions taken or made by you based on the information provided in this program. All insurance-related discussions are subject to the claims-paying ability of the company. Investing involves risk. Jason Parker is the president of Parker Financial, an independent fee-based wealth management firm located at 9057 Washington Avenue Northwest, Silverdale, Washington. For additional information, call 1-800-514-5046 or visit us online at soundretirementplanning.com.